Welcome to Sherlock Mondays, the Hound of the Baskervilles. I am Edward G. Pettit of the Roosevelt Museum and Library in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This is episode 4, and we will cover the 4th and 5th serial parts of the Hound, chapters 7, 8, and 9, as they were published in the Strand Magazine in November and December 1901. And joining me as co-host is Steve Doyle. Hey, Steve.
Hello, Ed. It's very nice to be here tonight. I'm a big fan of the show, so I'm very honored to be here this evening.
Thank you. I'm a big fan of all the Sherlockian work that you do. So this is very nice for me to have you on the show as well. Where's my pop-out chat? There it is. That's easier to see if I do the pop-out chat. Well, if you have questions, everyone, as you know, this is your 4th episode. I'm going to give you the instructions every time. If you have questions, put them in the Q&A function of the Zoom interface. If you just put them in the chat, I might not see them. It's hard to follow the chat the whole time. But feel free to use the chat to talk amongst yourselves. Really enjoy yourself and do all that in the chat. While Steve and I talk about the chapters. This show is also being recorded, and I share the link to the recording with everyone. So if you ever miss an episode, you can watch the recording, or you could just rewatch them all you want. It will be available until August 31st. So throughout the summer, you'll be able to watch this if you're registered for the show. And just a reminder for your chat comments, and a reminder for a reminder for Steve and I too during the show. No spoilers. There are some people in the audience who are just reading Hound for the first time. Isn't that great, Steve?
I'm jealous.
So as we're trying to cover it serially as it was published, we don't want to give away any of the mystery as it unfolds. So just like the original readers of the Strand Magazine encountered it. So let me fully introduce our co-host. Stephen Doyle wears many hats in the Sherlockian world, including being one half of the Sherlockian publishing company, Wessex Press, Gasogene Books, and publisher of the Baker Street Journal for the last 10 years. It's still just 10 years?
Well, maybe more like 11 now.
Maybe like 11 now. He also hosts the popular BSI video podcast, The Fortnightly Dispatch, which I highly recommend everyone to watch, all the people he interviews on there. Steve has authored or edited 7 books on Sherlock Holmes, including Sherlock Holmes for Dummies, and the released not long ago, Clutches of a Fiend, which was the latest in the Baker Street Irregulars manuscript series. And that is what story?
That is The Illustrious Client.
Illustrious Client. I was trying to remember the reference, the title there. Steve's a member of the Baker Street Irregulars and also leads the Illustrious Clients of Indianapolis, and also a founding member of the 140 Varieties of Tobacco Ash Scion, which I would love to come out for a meeting at some time, as well as the international movement known as SPODE. And maybe someone in the chat can help others with what SPODE means. SPODE. I'm a SPODE member as well.
Yes, you are.
I am so happy to have you part of this Hound program.
I'm very happy to be here.
And you are, as a what is your sobriquet for the Baker Street Irregulars?
I am the Western Morning News.
Western Morning News. That's fast.
Yes.
How long? When did you get?
Which is actually a reference from the Hound of the Baskervilles, by the way. So I was made the Western Morning News in a very long time ago, 1996, when I was just a boy.
Well, I want to ask, and we have a lot to cover tonight, so we're gonna need to get to that. But just briefly, I know there's no such thing as briefly, your Sherlock, like, how did you get started with Sherlock? And what I would really love to know too is, can you remember the first time you encountered the Hound?
Oh, indeed I can. Well, I fell under the spell of Sherlock Holmes back in the mid 1970s. during the sort of white hot boom of sparked by Nicholas Meyer's 7% Solution.
Yeah.
That was the book that changed the Sherlockian universe permanently forever. And if you weren't there, it's hard to know how big it was, but believe me, it was pretty big. And so the I was 14, 15 years old, something like that. I got some Sherlock Holmes books for Christmas. I read 7% Solution, and I was done. I was it. And I would say somewhere in the early winter of 1975, I was reading The Hound of the Baskervilles. And yeah. And I don't know how many times I've read it since then, but many times since then.
I love hearing the stories about how, well, because people now, they come through, like, oh, they first watched BBC Sherlock maybe, or Robert Downey
Sure, yeah.
the canon. But for some older Sherlockians, it's kind of the same thing. Nicholas Meyer's, pastiche 7% Solution.
Oh, indeed. It was like, we should not, sniff at the power of popular culture in introducing people to Sherlock Holmes. I mean, Sherlock Holmes himself
Is popular culture.
is popular culture. So, we should never let ourselves get too high and mighty there. I mean, Sherlock Holmes was never meant to be serious literature by the person who wrote it. And even though it's an enormously wonderful body of literature, it was meant to be enjoyed, and it has sparked many wave after wave of pop culture enthusiasm, and each wave brings more of us into the fold. So, that's just how it is.
It is wonderful. And it's so nice that Nicholas Meyer's back writing more Sherlock Holmes books. So
I completely agree.
2, 3 now, more, because he had stopped for a long time.
Oh my gosh. I think he's
busy doing,
I don't know. I've lost track. He's got a new one coming, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, I also have a drink tonight. I haven't been doing the specialty cocktails for the Hound, but tonight I have a drink, and this was Mickey Fromkin, well-known Sherlockian, maybe Mickey.
Oh, sure.
She sent me this recipe because the drink is the Hugo, and it's a drink. It's a Northern Italian take on a kind of Aperol or Campari spritz, but in this case, it is elderflower liqueur and prosecco, and a little bit of club soda to top it off with. But you take the elderflower liqueur and muddle it with some mint leaves, and
that sounds very refreshing.
And that's all. And it's like an ounce of elderflower liqueur muddled in the mint leaves. Fill it up with prosecco. Top it with club soda. It's super easy to do, and it's really crazy refreshing. This is a great drink for the warm summer months that are coming up now as we're recording these episodes. So I'm very happy to have it. And it's the Hugo. Clearly, that's why, it's here. Not named for Hugo Baskerville, but come on, for us it is. And
I confess that I am merely having a little bit of Irish whiskey tonight. So cheers.
Cheers. Somebody's got a question right away or a comment. I wonder if Steve is related to Arthur Conan.
No, not really. I suppose if you go back far enough, there's probably, some distant relative that all the Doyles hail from, but no, I cannot claim being related.
I got a little lag on your video. Do you want to stop your video and start it again?
Sure. Yes.
Will go away. All righty. Little technical issue with the video. Yeah, talk now.
How's this?
There seems to be a lag. I don't know where the lag is coming from.
I don't either.
But I can hear you, and we can hear you, and people in the chat tell me if you can hear and see Steve okay for this episode. So let me know if there's.
Well, hopefully this will clear up. Yes.
Yeah. Maybe it's just on my end.
I think I'm
We're
seeing it
getting a
eventually.
video lag, but you're still coming through loud and clear. So,
Okay.
all righty. Well, hopefully that will clear up. The we have a lot to get through because we have 3 chapters. So let's jump into that. Reminder, we're spoiler free. The last episode ended with Dr. Watson hearing a woman sobbing in the night at Baskerville Hall. Then silence next day. So I love that moment, Steve, when he hears the I mean, very gothic
Oh,
setting.
creepy.
Yeah,
Yes. I mean, it always has struck me that they didn't just jump out of bed and go find out, because they both heard it, right? They both heard the woman crying in the nighttime, and it was always kind of amazing to me that they did not go, and especially with everything that's going on
yeah.
uh, at Baskerville Hall, they didn't go to investigate it. So, yeah, that's a very gothic and kind of creepy
Wow.
image, kind of nightmarish in a way when you think about it.
Late night investigations will start in this serial part, as you've all read and know already. They and I am going to look at some of the Paget illustrations, but what I'm going to do is we're going to go through chapters 7 and 8, and then at the end of that, I want to look at all the illustrations, because there's an interesting kind of pairing that goes along with the illustrations in this chapter, in these 2 chapters, the serial part, and then we'll do chapter 9 and look at a couple illustrations as we go through it. All right, chapter 7, the Stapletons of Merripit House. So now we're getting to meet some of the neighbors, or we will get to meet some of the neighbors. The fresh beauty of the following morning did something to efface from our minds the grim and gray impressions which had been left upon both of us by our first experience at Baskerville Hall. The sunlight comes flooding through the windows, and morning brings hope, echoing maybe Sir Henry being Little Orphan Annie in the last chapter. Things may seem more cheerful in the morning. So
It's always more cheerful in the morning.
yeah, and when they dined, the room was dark and heavily in shadow, and now it's all nice. And Sir Henry notices this as well. And then, but Watson asks him, "Did you hear someone, a woman, I think, sobbing in the night?" And Sir Henry did hear it, so it's not just some kind of ghostly manifestation only heard by Watson. And there's always that everything that seems to happen. Then there's also the like with the footprints of the Hound, there's always a concurrent, here's the proof that this thing has actually occurred, and Doyle makes sure he goes through with that with everything. So we always have the is it supernatural or is it real, because it could be both.
Right. It's often inconclusive.
Yeah. Well, here when they ask Barrymore, and he turns pale and denies his wife was crying, and then Watson sees his wife with the tear-stained eyes and knows that she was crying, and Barrymore was lying. They've at least solved that mystery. Watson's good at solving mysteries in these chapters today, let me tell you, or at least he believes he is. This is Dr. John Watson, consulting detective, for these 3 chapters.
Oh yeah, he is. That's one of the great things. I mean, Watson has been sort of the Holmes's representative, in other stories with varying degrees of success. But Watson actually does a pretty good job here. I think he's here, and he's been given a big job, and he's throwing himself right into it.
He has, and we'll see evidence of that all through here. We get a description of Mrs. Barrymore here. She was a large, impassive, heavy-featured woman, which is not the way Paget draws her in the very when we see her the very first time. And this was in chapter 3, and I'll share the picture of that because it'll change when he draws her later in this issue. And this is her when they arrive at the hall. Barrymore, Mrs. Barrymore behind him, and she's, she's fairly slim, youngish looking.
Mm-hmm.
And now she's being described, and we'll see a picture of her later, which I'll share later, as heavy featured. But because apparently I guess Paget hadn't gotten this, she's not described in chapter 3, so he just draws whatever he wants, and I think that's the only difference in illustrations that we find here. Sometimes it happens with Paget's illustrations of Doyle, but not.
That's the danger of serialization. That Paget's, he's illustrating the stories, but he's kind of flying blind sometimes.
Yeah. Well, but in this case, at least, Doyle had finished it. He's not writing to deadline for this. He had finished the book when they started serialization, but I guess Paget wasn't bothering to read ahead or paying attention as he was reading ahead as he was doing it. Well, Watson, go ahead. Was that something, Steve?
No.
Oh. Well, Watson is investigating, right? And he's wondering now, like, this is all part of why had Barrymore lied? Why had he done this? Why did she weep so bitterly? He was the first to discover the body of Sir Charles. Was it possible that it was Barrymore, after all, whom we had seen in the cab in Regent Street, and the beard and all that? And Watson's going to go find out from the Grimpen postmaster if Barrymore actually got that telegram that was sent. So here we go. Watson, the consulting detective on the case. Holmes did warn him. He said, don't come up with any theories. Just observe and write down.
Just the facts.
But this is facts. He's going to go get some facts here. Grimpen is a 4-mile walk away. And the village of Grimpen, because we get the village of Grimpen and we also get Coombe Tracy. And just remember, there are 2 different places. I was going to share the Julian Wolff map again, Steve, which I shared in one of the previous episodes. Mm-hmm. But then when I was looking at this time, I realized, everyone, and I'm sorry if you saw something on it, there's markings on it that are spoilers that like say something happened, that it happened here. And I'm like, oh no, I hope nobody said that they saw a spoiler on that Julian Wolff map that I showed before, but I'm not going to show it again. But Holmes described the that map in the book, because there's no map in the book, and his description was when he sees the U out. You know what? Let me just share. This is the description of Holmes' description of reading the ordnance map. He reads the ordnance map and he describes it to Watson, and it's Baskerville Hall, and then there's the U alley, and then he says, I highlighted here, the moor is on the right of the U alley, so to the east of it, and then there's a small clump of buildings where it's the hamlet of Grimpen, and Dr. Mortimer lives there, and Laughter Hall, and he points out a couple other things, the High Tor and Foulmire, the Princeton prison, Princetown prison, Princeton.
Yes.
Town prison is very different from Princeton. But this is his description, and all we get for a map, which I wish they had done a map. So
that would have been nice. That would have been helpful, I think. Yeah.
Because it's happened in a couple stories where there's a little drawn map that you get to see.
Yes.
In Naval Treaty, you get the little map of the premises, and so something like that would have been fun. There is Grimpen. There is a Doyle calls it Grimpen, and which doesn't exist in the real Devonshire, but there is a Grimm's Pound on the moor, which was real, and it was actually a Bronze Age settlement there, and lots of stone, evidences of it, and lots of flint, heads that people have found there. And it was around 1300 BC or so is when people lived there. Doyle seems to have gotten this in, well, he could have gotten this information from Bertram Fletcher Robinson, visiting there himself, but it seems as if he really was also relying on a book called The Book of Dartmoor by Sabine Baring Gould.
Yes.
Who had written this, but he'd written a lot of kind of descriptive books about different areas and I mean, Sabine Baring Gould has a ton of, books that he had written. And all of this, the description, oh, we've lost Steve. Hopefully we'll get him back. The descriptions of the countryside, the settlements and everything, a lot of that comes from this Book of Dartmoor by Sabine Baring Gould. And what's interesting is Sabine Baring Gould is the grandfather or great-grandfather, I can't think of which, of William Baring Gould, who wrote the famous annotated Sherlock Holmes and published in the late 1960s. So let us hope we get Steve back in just a moment. Well, in the meantime, everyone, just another reminder, as usual, if you have questions, you put them in the Q&A function, where we will be happy to answer them. Or if you have, if you put them in the chat, I won't always see them. So that's why you put them in the Q&A function, and we can get to them. So, back to the story. We find out that Barrymore did not get the telegram, that he was actually in the loft when it was delivered from London. From Sherlock had wanted to find out if he was on the premises. So he so according to Watson, he's still a suspect. We had no proof that Barrymore had not been in London all the time. And he starts asking questions. Had he some sinister design of his own? What interest could he have in persecuting the Baskerville family? Now, he's, asking questions here, coming up with his own theories, and perhaps he should be waiting for Sherlock to do that. Max did have a question here. He's noticed in the collected Strand editions, the ones that have 6 or 12 issues, there are no advertisements. There are ads. And there were ads in the British and American. And I have actually a PDF of the American advertisements that I found online from the January issue of the Strand, which we'll be covering next week, and I'll share some of those advertisements then. But they're not the British ones; they're the American reader, the American Strand Magazine readers. So, but when they collected them in those editions that you can find online, Max, they did omit all those advertisements because it would be so big. And it's a business decision too. Someone's paying for advertisements in a monthly magazine. The magazine's certainly not going to continue to use those advertisements in a published volume form later. So, and Paul Chapman informs me that yes, Sabine Baring Gould was William Baring Gould's grandfather. Thank you, Paul. Well, I do hope we get Steve back for this. I'm sorry, everybody, that we had a bad connection here. I don't know why that happened. And hopefully he is correcting it as we go. Paul Chapman, if you are camera ready and want to jump on, let me know in the chat and I'll bring you on, and we'll have someone else on here while we wait for Steve to come back. Oh, and Monica is all ready. Monica, I'm going to, if you're ready, Monica, tell me you're ready, and then I will allow you to talk. I will enable your video. But I don't want to do it if you're not ready. Good. I just hit promote to panelist. Oh, it's nice when other co-hosts are already watching the show and you can bring them on. Here we go.
Guten Tag.
Hello.
I can switch to a better spot. I'm actually camping out in the living room right now.
You're
So
good there. You got a little light
okay.
coming from your
Okay. Others,
Be
yeah,
fine.
well, the lighting isn't great, but so we're gonna do a little bit of a
We'll
relocation.
be fine. We hope Steve gets back.
Yeah.
Had a
Worst case scenario, we're camping out. So
All righty. Well, we're in this and one of the Watson's investigating, Monica, and
okay.
then he also mentions about Barrymore that he was, well, first he was the last who had seen Sir Charles alive, and then it says, well, suppose that Barrymore was not only that person but also the first to dog the new heir when he returned to England. I don't know if Doyle means that pun right there, to dog him in the Hound show. But I missed it actually in chapter 5, the last issue. Sir Henry had said, or Sherlock said to Sir Henry, I have ample evidence that you were being dogged in London, and I didn't point it out. And it's, it's funny.
Yeah, that is a delightful pun. And I'm glad I'm here for it this time around as compared to last week. So
Well, it's good to see you. Thank you.
well, no worries. It is all good. And it's good to be back. I wasn't planning on being here. I was planning on just kind of chilling out as one can see. This is no makeup yard work, Monica. So or at least fresh out of, we'll just say out of dealing with yard work, but I'm sure everybody is fine with the slightly less professionally polished me. So
we are. Well, Watson is, as I mentioned, he's theorizing here. This is what Sherlock told him not to do. Kind of the only conceivable motive that he would have. Don't come up with the motives, Watson. Come up with the facts. Send him to Sherlock. But this is what he's doing. And then, but he also says that I wish Sherlock was here. I prayed as I walked back along the gray, lonely road that my friend might soon be freed from his preoccupations and able to come down to take this heavy burden of responsibility from my shoulders. So, yep. It's not all fun and games doing the investigating, is it?
No. I mean, it's a lot of work. It's kind of like, for me as a therapist, people think that I just sit and listen to people all day. It's actually a lot of work to genuinely actively listen to people all day, every day for for hours on end. So I can appreciate, active detective work being way more fun, or and way more intensive.
Yep. Well, Watson is heading back to Baskerville Hall now, and he hears the sound of running feet, and he is accosted by a small, slim, clean-shaven, prim-faced man, flaxen-haired and lean-jawed, between 30 and 40 years of age. Boy, Watson gets a good description down. That's good stuff, Watson. He's got a tin box for botanical specimens and his green butterfly net, and I am Stapleton of Merripit House.
Yes.
And he knows who Watson is. He says, Dr. Mortimer pointed you out to me. So we're getting to meet. Now we get to meet another one of the neighbors. And all of the neighbors, according to Sherlock, are suspects because they all live near the hall and somebody maybe is doing something. And Stapleton then asks about Sherlock. Well, first he says he's worried about Sir Henry. You know,
Oh, yes.
Henry would be worried about Sir Henry would be worried, and because Sir Charles was afraid of the Hound legend, um, and um, and that there is. Watson says, "Would you believe?" He's like, "Well, there have been seen such a
Mhm.
creature. They have the people around have seen such a creature on the moor, but he doesn't seem to be taking it seriously himself." And then he asks about Sherlock Holmes.
Yes. Has Mr. Sherlock Holmes come to any conclusion?
And Watson's really surprised. Like, why would you mention Sherlock? Listen, like Watson's on his guard here. Why would you?
Yeah.
Where it took my breath away for an instant. Um, and Stapleton said, and I love this. It's useless for us to pretend that we did not know you, Dr. Watson. The records of your detective have reached us here, and you could not celebrate him without being known yourself. Watson's famous.
Yes, yes. Your fame and notoriety, actually like are a disadvantage here. There is no anonymity anymore for Dr. Watson. He is now a known quantity.
Which, of course, plays havoc for chronologists, because if this is 1891, how could these, like, there's not enough stories out, it's everything is 1880, 89. I forget when
Well, if this is 1888, but I mean, again, there's some stories that are set, that are set prior to 1888. But I mean, when you also think about it, um, as much as I hate to say it, and this is getting very much kind of deep in the game here, but I wrote an essay once, and this is not spoilers because it comes up in Empty House, the concept of Watson's bereavement.
Yeah.
The whole concept for me is that a lot of people believe that that's referring to Watson's wife dying, like Mary Morstan dying. I've always theorized, just that Watson only had one wife, and that the bereavement actually was a child, not a wife. And the reason why I support that, or how I support that, is the idea that Sherlock Holmes and Watson are famous. And when you think about it, if somebody's child has just died, what is the best way of keeping their wife, who is grieving, out of the press when you're famous? Basically redirection, hence the chronology errors in the stories. It's basically about keeping, or kind of keeping the press and fame away from Watson's wife. So, I mean, as I said, that's my theory.
Yeah.
But
And they're
it's as good as any at this point.
Max put a theory in the chat. Watson's remembering a different encounter from later in his career. This is obviously an artifact of his recounting this tale from the modern day, looking back in 1901.
That's
Come
fair.
up with all these theories. It's fascinating because, and it's what makes playing the Sherlockian game so much fun, is that Doyle didn't pay attention to these details, so we get to pay attention to them for him, and then get to come up with all these fun ways to explain this, a real chronology of these stories. So, all righty. Stapleton says that well, if you're here, that a follows Mr. Sherlock is also interested, and what does he think? And Watson's won't reveal anything.
Oh yes, Watson is being the good stalwart old fellow, who is loyal and not revealing a darn thing.
And Stapleton just gives him a thing like, you're right, I'm not gonna, you're perfectly right to be wary and discreet. And now we get a little more description of the area here, of the moors. He tells us, well, there's Merripit House over there where he lives. And then he starts talking about the moor. You never tire of the moor. You cannot think the wonderful secrets which it contains. It is so vast and so barren and so mysterious. So I like this, description of the place. And it must be also bleak creepy, but Stapleton seems to really enjoy this kind of, landscape. And he's been there for a couple years. And then he shows him the Grimpenmire.
Ah, yes.
A false step yonder means death to man or beast. I saw one of the moor ponies wander into it. He never came out. I saw his
Oh,
head
yes.
quite a long time craning out of the bog hole, but it sucked him down at last.
Ah,
So nothing like, well, it's not technically quicksand, but for me, it's
but
always,
it's intents and purposes like
Yeah.
quicksand. I mean, it does harken back, at least to me, for one of the things that traumatized me in childhood, which would be Artax in the Never-Ending Story. I don't know how familiar you are with
a little
with
bit.
that film. Basically that happened to our main character Atreyu's pony, Artax, in the movie. And watching it as a kid, oh my God, there's nothing more traumatizing than a horse death as it slowly sinks into essentially the quicksand or the Grimpen Mire, if you
As
will.
a comedian, I think it was John Mulaney, I think,
Mhm.
that talks about how, when he was a kid, he thought for the rest of his life he was going to have to worry about quicksand. Like quicksand was going to get you because it's
Yep.
so many movies and
Exactly.
cartoons
It
and
it is
things.
not exactly I have yet, let's see,
And
at
yet,
42 years of age, I have yet to encounter a quicksand.
I'm not out in the wilds. I'm not out walking the moors where there could be these, bog pits. But I thought it was going to come up more, just like John Mulaney. I thought it would come up more
Ah,
in my life. So
oh, there we go.
there
We
we
have a
go.
Steve. All right, I was the Steve emergency fill-in briefly, so
Oh, thank
yeah,
you.
Hey,
I
it's all
Steve.
good.
have no idea what happened. I had a completely changed computer, so
All righty.
Technology, right?
oh sorry.
Monica was in the audience. I brought her on. Paul Chapman's in the audience. I could have brought him on. There's always a Sherlockian co-host out there.
Exactly.
lurking.
In which case I will I was just gonna say lower me down for I am not camera ready. But
Sorry, everybody.
All
I
righty.
have no
Thanks,
idea what happened.
Monica. I'm gonna
all right,
stop the
much love,
video.
guys.
I'll see
Good
ya.
to come play, even if briefly. Take care, guys, and welcome back, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I have to put her back into the I have to put her into change role to attendee. There we go. Did that work? Try it again. There it is. Hi, Steve. Welcome back.
Thank you, Ed. I have
Don't
no
worry.
idea
It
what happened.
happens. It's happened on shows in the past. What happens when you go live? This thing could happen. We covered, kept talking. What we're up to is Watson's just met Stapleton, and Stapleton is
Okay, good. Yes.
pointed out the poor pony sinking in the bog hole. And then sure enough, while he tells him that story, there's another one.
A coincidence. I know. That was yes.
The
His
ponies
nets
are just
in the bog.
don't go there, ponies. And they watch it. And Watson says it turned me cold with horror. But my companion's nerves seem to be stronger than mine. So Stapleton knows this. He's seen it. It's gone. The mire has him. And Watson wonders, like, well, what the heck are you doing out here? Why would you want to be here? And of course, Stapleton, because he's a naturalist, he loves it for the plants and the butterflies.
Right.
Which of course leads Watson, oh, I shall try my luck someday. Oh, that sounds like fun. No. Stapleton tells him, do not do it. For God's sake, put such an idea out of your mind. And then they hear it. A long, low moan, indescribably sad, swept over the moor. It filled the whole air, and yet it was impossible to say whence it came. From a dull murmur, it swelled into a deep roar and then sank back into a melancholy, throbbing murmur once again.
Yes.
Queer place, the moor, said he.
Indeed.
But it is really a very creepy description that Doyle gives, what then Stapleton says, will admit is like, that's what people say. That's the Hound of the Baskervilles. So,
Well, and one of the things about his description of the moor is, Doyle is a tremendous writer when it comes to his ability to make setting almost a character
yeah,
is really outstanding. This is a perfect example of that. He does it again in the Valley of Fear, particularly in the middle section that nobody really likes, but it's wonderful. His ability to write about location so that it actually becomes a character in the narrative, sort of a pervasive character, is really wonderful. And this is a very good example, talking about this would be a good place for a gallop. Oh, no, just the other day, the pony, it's a melancholy place. And then we get the low moan coming from who knows where.
yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a thing.
He tries, he gives a naturalist, maybe example. It could be the bittern booming. A bittern, everyone, is a large wading bird. That there could be bitterns there. It's not completely unusual, but I have to put in the our chat, Mrs. Hudson Brianna can put in the chat. There's a link to a web page where you can actually click on and hear the booming of the bitterns, and it does not put a chill in your heart like that sound that Watson had described. It's much shorter, and it clearly couldn't be something like that.
Well, Stapleton himself says, well, some people say it's the Hound of the Baskervilles.
Yeah, and that's what the people have, said that it probably was, and which is what we're supposed to think that I think it is, and as we'll hear it again later in these chapters, that is, seems to be the sound that people are hearing that they are equating with the Hound. He also points out that in the landscape, the gray circular rings of stone, and lets Watson know that they are the prehistoric peoples live there, the homes of our worthy ancestors. He says they're Neolithic man, no date, which I guess Doyle doesn't know, and I don't know if I can't remember if Sabine Baring Gould gives a particular year for them, but they're not Neolithic. Neolithic is like 4,000 to 2000 BC. It's the new Stone Age, so it's like the end of the Stone Age. But Grimspound, the real Grimspound in Devon, is actually Bronze Age, which is like the end of the Neolithic to like 1200 BC. If you think Neolithic is like the Flintstones, okay, Stone Age, cars, stones, but everything's stone. Stone tools, everything. The
cars are stone, everything's stone.
Bronze Age are like Fred and Barney's, like, great grandchildren. That's after them, and people are starting to utilize metal for tools. That's why they call it Bronze Age. After, of course, the aliens visited Earth and taught us how to use metal instruments. So, but Stapleton does recognize these developments in the, they learned to dig for tin when the bronze sword began to supersede the stone axe. So he does recognize it. He just said Neolithic, and it's not Neolithic.
Right.
It's
It's sort of shorthand for prehistoric.
Yeah, prehistoric, oldie times.
Yes.
With cave people, well, stone hut people. So
yes.
There you go. And then suddenly he's got to chase after the butterfly. Oh, excuse me an instant. It is surely Cyclopides, which is a spotted butterfly. And I have a picture of Cyclopides here. Where's my Cyclopides pictures? I think they're on here. Yeah, here's a picture of all the different Cyclopides that from a 19th century book of natural history. And they're the cyclopedies. So I would think, like, I'm assuming, you know, I don't know, I'm thinking like a one eye, but they've all got two eyes or multiple eyes, but it's spotted. I think there's a spotted thing in there is the root
Yeah.
of it. So
Yes.
so one of these things he sees flying around, and he goes tearing after it. And he rushes right into the Grimpen mire where he told Watson not to go, because he gets sucked down forever, like one of those ponies. And Watson turns around and finds a woman near him upon the path, and she had come from the direction of Merripit House. He thinks it's Miss Stapleton, his sister. Watson can't help but describe her, because this is what Watson does every time he sees a woman, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
But also could not have been a greater contrast between brother and sister. She was darker than any brunette whom I have seen in England, slim, delicate, and tall. She had a proud, finely cut face. All right, settle down, Watson. Sensitive mouth,
Down, boy.
beautiful, dark, eager eyes. Really? Perfect figure and elegant dress. So
yes, Holmes often accuses Watson of being unobservant, except when there's a woman.
he sees the ladies. So yeah.
Yes.
Well, he also very, you know, specifically described Stapleton too when he saw him. So very, you know, Watson does have really good powers of observation in what he sees. What he doesn't seem to have, that Sherlock always points out that you don't have this, is that putting together what that means. So
right.
Well, he sees her, and this beautiful woman runs right up to him and says, "Get away." Go straight back to London instantly. Her eyes blazed at me. She says, "I can't tell you why. Go back and never set foot upon the moor again." You know, she just keeps telling, "I've only just come." And then
What?
Stapleton comes back, and she's like, "Quiet. Don't tell him I said this to you." And then he says, "Hello." Hello, Barrow. And he's like, "Oh," she says, "I was telling Sir Henry here about the beauties of the moor." And he's like, "What? That's not Sir Henry. That's Watson." She told the wrong person. So foot in her mouth here, warned the wrong person.
It's a really great scene too, because there's a lot of we've been talking at cross purposes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like, there's a lot of unspoken stuff going on between Watson and Beryl. And you can just almost imagine her looking at him, giving him the penetrating gaze. "Oh, we've been talking at cross purposes," and just like, "You're not gonna, don't give me away," kind of that moment, where they're sort of mutually found out.
They both have a little bit, like, he's glancing incessantly from the girl to me. Watson notices that he tried to talk unconcernedly, but he's looking back and forth, like, did she say?
Yes.
Like, so Watson notes that there's some kind of suspicion going on.
Right. There's something going on here that.
And but Stapleton invites him back to Merripit House. And Watson again is like, looking out the window at Merripit, can't believe that, they would move here. Like, why on earth would you move to this bleak landscape? And Stapleton even says, "My sister loves it too." And Watson looks at her and is like, "She doesn't look like she loves it. But I am never dull," she said quickly. And, he says, "Stapleton, we have our books and our studies and interesting neighbors. So what more could you want? Books, and we know about 3 people."
And they're a long way away across the deadly moor.
across a moor that you could die in.
Right. The Grimpen Mire. I mean, that's a terrible name. Good Lord.
Well,
What more
Watson,
could you want?
yeah, what more could you? Watson goes back to Baskerville, and as he's heading back, suddenly, he runs into her again. She must have headed him off. And she says, "Forget it. I'm sorry I said that to you, and don't tell Sir Henry." And then Watson tries to get her to tell him why she would warn him, like why she would warn Sir Henry, but she won't give him an answer, except that we were shocked about Sir Charles, and we're afraid that if another family member comes down, that they'll be in danger too. So Watson thinks, well, maybe you believe in the Hound, and she says no, but they're she's concerned that some harm will come to Sir Henry, and then and her reason for not telling her brother this is that he really wants the hall inhabited. So
Right.
that's her reason for it. So
Yes.
Max has a question. Mayor has a question here about, because Monica and I were talking about Watson and his wife, and maybe another reason for him mourning or being in bereavement. Monica has one of those with the theory that it was a child mourning, not his wife. And Mayor wants to ask about the, or wants to let us know that taking into account the Victorian Edwardian mourning etiquette in terms of Watson's wife being absent, depending on the relationship of the survivor to the deceased, one might observe mourning for 6 months to a year. So we can look at mourning practices to figure that out too. But I don't want to go into that because I got a lot to cover in the Hound. But thank you, Mayor. But Max has a question, Steve, because you are also an expert on the White Company, which I just finished reading like a couple weeks ago.
Did you love it? Was it great?
The annotated edition published by Wessex Press, which is a fabulous annotated edition of the White Company. Max says, I was just reading it, and it opens with jays chattering and bitterns booming. And he noticed a number of other rather esoteric words and phrases that were familiar from other Doyle stories. Were there any others that stick out to you, Steve, especially that might relate to the Hound?
Well, the bitterns booming, I noted that when we were working on White Company. It was like, there are things that pop up. Even names will get kind of recycled. And Doyle was a huge recycler of things, and things that he read and experienced in real life. All of that was fodder for his writing. I can't think of any off the top of my head.
It is a great example, that book, of landscape description. We get a good bit of that here.
It is
different.
It really is. But
it's strong on that.
His ability to paint a picture of a setting or a scene, location, is in words, is really quite outstanding. And I think that but if you read a lot of Doyle's, if you read all of Sherlock Holmes, you'll notice that happening in the canon too. But if you read his non-Sherlockian writing as well, you will begin to notice you will notice many things popping up that you have read in the Sherlock Holmes stories too. They will, names sound familiar, settings, even scenarios in the stories will be clearly he's read something or something has struck him that he will reuse more than once in his fiction.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, the White Company is a medieval romance that
highly recommended. I mean, it's an adventure story. It's really fun. And I didn't write it, so I can say that. It's great.
All righty. I'm making another drink here, pouring this in, because one Hugo is not enough. One Hugo is definitely enough for the Baskerville family, but one Hugo cocktail is certainly not enough for me. All righty. Well, now we're at the end of that chapter, and we're on chapter 8, the first report of Dr. Watson. From this point onwards, we'll follow the course of events by transcribing my own letters to Sherlock Holmes, which lie before me on the table. One page is missing, but otherwise they're exactly as written. Now, we could talk about this later, but might as well mention it now because he does. There's no, like, what page is missing and why would you say that?
Well, yeah.
There's
and
no
we don't know-
answer by the time we get to the end, right, Steve?
Yeah, right, exactly.
That's why I could mention it now. We don't know, but apparently,
Look, in every great classic murder mystery, it's the missing page that has everything you need to. That's the key to everything.
so I think he's setting us up, but then that doesn't happen, so I don't know. Well, it's Baskerville Hall, October 13th. So now we get some dates in here as well. And we also find out that Watson has already sent letters and telegrams before this. And my previous letters and telegrams have kept you pretty well up to date. So I guess that was everything we've read so far that has happened in this account. He has also sent to Holmes. So
Right.
unless that's the letter missing, maybe that's what he means. Like everything I've written is actually
maybe.
a letter to Holmes.
It could be.
So, so I've already told everything that's occurred in this most God-forsaken corner of the world. So the landscape is not lost on Watson, watching ponies die before his eyes.
Mysterious moaning, howling going on.
And these
All that.
he tells Holmes that if you come here, you'll have left all traces of modern England behind you, the homes and the work of prehistoric people, houses of the forgotten folk, and their graves with the huge monoliths which are supposed to have marked their temples. That we get so many. We'll get lots of references in this, Steve, to the prehistoric peoples that used to live there.
Yes.
And I'll bring this up again later. I just want to point out here another instance of he's mentioning prehistory and we're still living in it and it's coming back or we're surrounded by it in some way. But I'll mention it again later. He also mentions that Holmes, this stuff will be uninteresting to Holmes because I can still remember your complete indifference as to whether the sun moved round the earth or the earth round the sun. From Study in Scarlet, everyone, the very first story where Holmes he's like, I don't care if the sun goes around the earth goes around the sun, that doesn't matter. And Watson's like, why you have to know this?
And what's interesting about that is many of the, Watson made that famous list, right?
Yeah.
Of strengths and weaknesses of Sherlock Holmes in study.
What things that he knew and things that he doesn't.
Things he didn't know, right? Exactly. And which quickly becomes obviously completely inaccurate.
Yeah.
Except obviously for this
one.
Obviously this one was right.
So Doyle sets him up as somebody who's not interested in this stuff and then quickly makes him a polymath where he knows. So, but it's a little dig that Watson gets, which I think is fun here. But also, it's also another reminder, Steve. I've seen several times in these serial parts where Doyle is specifically giving us information about Holmes that the regular Holmes reader would know already, but it's been 7 or 8 years since he's published a Holmes, and clearly there's going to be new readers. And so he's still painting, he's repainting the picture.
Right. He's sort of reintroducing the character to new readers continually. He doesn't really presume that everybody who's reading this story has necessarily read A Study in Scarlet, for instance.
Well, Watson assumes that this escaped convict upon the moor, Selden, has probably got away. Nobody's found him yet. He's thinking that these stone huts on the moor would be a good hiding place for him. But even though he might be gone, he's still a little worried, even with the people that live around there, with the Miss Stapleton with the eager eyes could be in danger. And even suggests that Sir Henry and he thinks that they should send one of their Perkins the groom from Baskerville Hall to go stay with them, but the Stapletons will have none of that. No, thank you. We are on our own, on the moors, independent. we're not afraid.
Right.
Well, Sir Henry meets her, and Watson notices right away that Sir Henry's got some hidden fires. I'm sorry, no, that was about Stapleton. I trust that he is kind to her. There is a the baronet. Yeah, the baronet begins to display a considerable interest in our fair neighbor, and he says, there is a dry glitter in his eyes, a firm set of his thin lips, which go with a positive and possibly a harsh nature. Now, this is the second time we've had dry glitter mentioned. I didn't mention it the first time in the Hound. And at first, I don't know what the heck he means. Like, I'm just unfamiliar with someone saying someone has a dry glitter in their eyes as they're looking. And the first time was when Holmes, right after, it's in chapter 3, and it's right after Mortimer says they were the footprints of a gigantic hound. And Watson writes, Holmes leaned forward in his excitement, and his eyes had the hard, dry glitter which shot from them when he was keenly interested.
Yeah.
Glitter, brilliant, shining, but with
Shiny, sparkling.
right?
Yeah.
I think there's the glittering eye of the Ancient Mariner, right? In the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, the glittering eye is mentioned a few times. He fixes the narrator to listen, but dry glitter, I never heard of that. And
no, me either. It's curious.
I looked it up, and I found several uses in 19th century fiction that eyes described as having a dry glitter. And
were these popular, well-known?
Always about the eyes. Nobody says a dry glitter about anything else. It's always about the eyes. And in the first half of the 20th century, that's when the metaphor expands. But for the 19th century, there's also a book I found called The Lover's Lexicon, which is a handbook for novelists and playwrights on how to write about love. And it's serious. It wasn't a parody book or a satire.
Wow.
And there's a quote in it that says, in a passage about one of those dangerous lovers and how you would describe them or how they're portrayed.
Yes.
It says, enough of the beauty of the devil, except to note one sign which appears in all its varieties, a dry glitter in the eyes when genuine emotions, which should be soft, stir in the bosom below. That woman can tell of a corresponding beauté du diable amongst men seems very likely, but on that point, well, the point is like the dry glitter for this person writing about love is a kind of very intense look. A hard, dry glitter. And would not be an unusual expression for his audience, but for me, I don't, because we don't see it anymore. Nobody uses that anymore to describe eyes, or not in instances I've discovered.
Right. My guess would be that he has read something recently in which this, contemporaneously with writing this story.
Pettit twice, it's unconsciously.
Yeah, right. It's there. It's in his head.
And but I think the description here about Sir Henry, there's a dry glitter in his eyes, a firm set of his thin lips that go with a positive and possibly a harsh nature. That's part of it. That's that. It means, harsh, hard, intense,
right,
sparkly.
Sorry, sort of a resolve, a real determined focus.
Yeah. Well, that was a rabbit hole I had to go down because I love that expression, and I'm certainly going to use
really interesting
the dry glitter in somebody's eyes.
I don't think we hear. I don't know, but I think it's only in this story. I don't remember hearing that phrase.
It's only in this story.
Yeah.
Twice. Interesting. In the serial. Yeah. Stapleton calls upon Baskerville and then takes him out to see the spot where the wicked Sir Hugo, cheers, is supposed to have had its origin. And there's an illustration of this, which I'll point out later when we're done this chapter. It was a short valley between rugged tors. There were two great stones, worn and sharpened at the upper end until they looked like the huge corroding fangs of some monstrous beast. You know, I love the description of this.
Yeah. It's so good.
And Sir Henry seems interested in the kind of supernatural, you know, possibilities here, and asked Stapleton about it. But Stapleton, it says, was guarded in his replies, but it was easy to see that he said less than he might, and that he would not express his whole opinion out of consideration for the feelings of the baronet. So, I mean, Sir Charles had been scared by it. It seems to Watson that Staple doesn't want him to, you know, be scary at
Right.
Max McGee did find a steely glitter in Boscombe Valley, not dry, but still glittering. A steely glitter would be, you know, close to that hard, dry glitter, I think, as well. Thanks, Max. Max, you should be a co-host. Oh, he will be. Episode number 8. We'll have Max McGee. Hardly a day has passed that Sir Henry hasn't seen the Stapletons, and Watson can tell Stapleton's not liking this. That he's interested. He's trying to prevent them from having a tete-a-tete, from being alone, and so, you know.
Yeah, no, he's not happy.
Little warning for the future. That's something, you know, the Watsons like worried that something could happen between the two of them. And then the Mortimer comes on another day and shows them in the yew alley, at Sir Henry's request. Can you show me exactly where, you know, Sir Charles had died? And he shows him the spot. Watson's, again, more questions, because this is Watson investigating, right? He's wondering, you know,
He's on the case. Yep.
was it a sheepdog or a spectral hound? Was there human agency in the matter? Did the pale, watchful Barrymore know more than he cared to say? Come on, Watson. I thought Barrymore wasn't a suspect. No, he is a suspect. No, he is a suspect now, because the postmaster, it didn't arrive. He never got that letter.
Right. Exactly.
Still a suspect.
Yes. Watson does not like Barrymore. That's it.
Yeah, he really wants to throw Barrymore under here. I'm going to solve this. It's going to be Barrymore. It's going to be the butler. We find Mr. Franklin here in the story of Laughter Hall, who spent a large fortune in litigation, all he does is these frivolous lawsuits. And even Watson, and Doyle lets us know, Watson says, he helps to keep our lives from being monotonous and gives a little comic relief where it is badly needed. He's literally comic relief in the story. That's what we're told.
Indeed, he is. He is sort of a, he's certain. No, I don't think anybody reading this story ever thinks of him as an actual suspect. He's just sort of the neighborhood crank, really. You know, he's the guy who just, and you know, is there. He's adding local color to the neighborhood.
Yep. Which makes him not seem dangerous. So, but we don't know enough yet. So
right, exactly. I mean, we don't really know him yet. We just know that he's this eccentric guy who likes to cause trouble. He likes to stir the pot, you know.
Yep. Well, now now they confront Barrymore about the not getting the telegram, and they say, "Did you get the telegram?" And he says, "Well, no, you know, because I was in the loft, and I told my wife to respond." And then comes back to him, Barrymore, and he says, "I trust that your questions do not mean I have done anything to forfeit your confidence."
What do you think?
And, yeah. And I like that Sir Henry is upset by like, I don't want to upset the help. So he pacifies him by giving him a considerable part of his old wardrobe. Now that the London outfit having now all arrived. So now he can dress like the country squire. He doesn't need his old clothes.
Right.
So he gives them all to Barrymore. And Watson is now also interested in Mrs. Barrymore. She is of interest to me. She is a heavy, solid person. Again, we get she's a larger person. Inclined to be puritanical, but he can tell that some deep sorrow gnaws ever at her heart. I suspect Barrymore of being a domestic tyrant. He's really all about Barrymore.
He does not like Barrymore. He is like.
Well, at night, Watson here steps outside of his bedroom. He goes out down the hall, and sure enough, Barrymore crouching at the window with the
There he
candle
is.
held against the glass. And suspicious behavior. In the middle of the night, Barrymore's walking around, shining a light in the windows. And he and Sir Henry, they tell Sir Henry this, and they made a plan of campaign founded upon my observations of last night. To be
Now, I will say this in defense of Watson. I mean, he has a bit of a, bee in his bonnet about Barrymore, but actually it's sort of perfectly reasonable if you think about it. I mean, he's got the black beard, like the guy in the cab. He's, we've never been able to clear him with the telegram. Now he's creeping around the night, signaling someone, his wife's crying in the night. I mean, Watson's, it's not unreasonable.
Someone asks, is Sir Henry completely eliminated as a suspect? Shouldn't all the heirs be? That's a good point. I mean,
that is a good question.
He really isn't. And Watson hasn't done a thing about, really keeping his eye on Sir Henry and making sure that it's not him. So.
Holmes, that's an interesting point, because does Holmes wonder about Sir Henry? Because he tells Watson, never leave his side.
Yeah.
Is he protecting him, or is he also keeping his eye on him?
Right.
So, that's a good question.
But from what we see of Watson, he's not really. He's not worried about Sir Henry at all.
No.
Holmes would be. Well, Holmes would have already figured out who did it, and would be just waiting for clarification. Well, that's the end of that. Not only the end of that chapter, but continue. That's the end of that serial part. And I want to look at the pictures, the illustrations for it. And I'll start with the first two, and because I find it interesting, Steve, that they're three of them are kind of in pairs in the way they're put together. Here's the first illustration.
Yes.
And it's Stapleton running towards Watson, with his hand out, holding his thing here, and Watson waiting for him. And then here's another picture where he's pointing. Again, it's the hand looking out, and it's Watson and Stapleton just reversed.
Yes.
First two illustrations. Here we get. It's pretty good with the bleakness here of the moor, but I have so far, Steve, been disappointed in Paget's rendering of. We get these really great descriptions, and I haven't found them so much in the illustrations that that he's been putting together. Now, somebody mentioned last time that, it's hard to bring some of that out in the black and white and all, and I'm like, I don't think so.
I'm not so sure. I think he seems to be concentrating more on the people.
On portraiture. This is what he does really well, and this is what he's been focusing on for these.
Right.
But we know he can do landscape well, because the very last story that you illustrated was The Final Problem, and in that, he really gives us these spectacularly great landscape pictures, not only of the falls, but there's a couple others in there too that are really well done, of the landscape of Switzerland, of Watson and Sherlock through it, but in this we don't get it so much. Well,
No, we're getting a big rock, that sort of
and
suggests.
again here, it's just there's so much blank in here. Now maybe that's part of it, that he's like, but it's a desolate landscape.
It's
but
kind of a wasteland or something.
yeah. Well, now the next two pictures are Watson and the other Stapleton, Watson and Barrel, and again, it's mirrored. Here's he and her, and then we get the reverse. Although I love her come hither pose on the rock here. Hand on her hip over here.
It's an interesting wardrobe for the Grimpen Meyer.
Out on the moors.
You're the wife of a naturalist. I mean, I'm sure somebody more familiar or expert.
But she's still the Victorian woman, and she's not going to, go against the rules of decorum by wearing, clothes that don't suit her status in life and her status as a woman, I imagine. Or at least that's the picture that we're getting here.
That is the picture we're getting. It does strike me as a little incongruous, though. I mean,
yeah. The next couple were the two scenes where they're being shown. Here is they should have been the other way around, because here's Stapleton showing them the place where where Sir Charles was killed, where Sir Hugo was killed originally. And then here is Dr. Mortimer showing them where Sir Charles was found. And even the figures here, it's here's a figure pointing at something. Yep. Here's a guy pointing at something.
Yeah.
And we get these, so the first 6 illustrations are all these pairs. Here's a much better landscape portraiture. Look at this with the stones behind and the 2 jagged stones here. Here he's really done well with it, and that works really well. And
you'll notice that the people are much smaller in the picture. He's like de-emphasized the people in favor of the surroundings.
So here's the picture where he's put together the landscape to really demonstrate it. I like this detail, something I had never thought of. This is the path where the yew trees are, and this is what it looks like. It's like this fenced-in hedge that he is drawn as, and I had never pictured it this way until I had seen this picture of them all closely densed together here, and that would make this kind of loop.
Yeah.
All righty, so we get 6 pictures that are all pairs, and then here they are together, and here's the last one, which is this really well done illustration of Barrymore looking out the window here, but just single alone, bare feet, because he's creeping around the house. The mullioned windows, the lighting here is really well done. Where
the lighting is outstanding.
It's just and he does it really well. Paget, the way it's lighting his face, and you get the frame of the windows, probably from the moon coming through. And we know the moon is out because we'll see that soon in the next chapter. So
I mean, the Gothic nature of that illustration is really tremendous. It's just right there. So
everybody's paired up, and then we get the single Barrymore at the end of the issue. That's nice seeing them all in one shot here, as this is Paget's working through what he's been probably told to illustrate. He's been probably told by the art editor of the Strand, do this scene, do this scene, do this scene, like he's probably been told all of these. It's not likely he came up with any of this on his own. But what's interesting is that for first readers, as they're coming across this, it's not unusual for people to page through and look at all the illustration. You can imagine this happen, and you can imagine trying to tell the story through the illustrations. And I have that complete Paget illustration book by Nicholas Utekin, and I'm going to do that at one point. I'm going to pull out one of the stories and just look at all the illustrations and see, I want to give it to someone who doesn't know the stories, and I'm going to say, look at these 8-10 illustrations from the story. Can you tell me what it is? And I wonder how many narratives you can put together by just looking at stories. So
I think Paget's really good at not, well, except for the classic one in Final Problem, not giving a lot of spoilers.
Yeah.
Of course, the one in Final Problem is they're going over, they're
It
on,
is.
they're,
And it's also a well-publicized thing. I think there were very few readers of the edition that didn't know Sherlock was going to be dying. And
right,
like the Strand themselves published that the death of Sherlock
right.
Holmes.
They're the ones who put it right at the front,
They
so
even
there you go.
before that, in issues before, and advertising the story coming up, they were telling people he's going to die. So
Right,
people had been aware of it, so it wasn't a complete spoiler.
right. But I think in general, he's actually pretty good about not, I mean, there's a famous story where Doyle complained about an illustrator that was not Paget, and his complaint was that he tended to give spoilers in his illustrations.
Yeah.
And I think Paget was pretty good at not doing that. I don't know if Doyle had communicated that to him or not, but he was actually if he's picking these sort of scenes that when they're completely out of the literary context, they're not really giving that much away.
Yeah. All righty. All right. I want to remind people not to give spoilers away as we're going through these things here. And as I hope I'm not doing. But let's get to the next issue here. Oh, we're doing good on time. December 1891, Strand Magazine. I'm sorry, December 1901. Well, I said 1890. It's literally in my notes. I wrote 1891. December 1901, the Strand Magazine. This is chapter 9 comes out, and it's the second report of Dr. Watson, The Light Upon the Moor. Baskerville Hall, October 15th. My dear Holmes. I love it. It's the start of a letter. So, my dear Holmes. And they if I was compelled to leave you without much news during the early days of my mission, you must acknowledge that I'm making up for lost time. So, and again, there's another thing, like maybe there were letters before that he was just like, he didn't say anything in, that we don't get them. But now things have taken a turn, which I could not have anticipated, become much clearer, and in some ways they have become more complicated. So little Watson teasing Holmes. I'm going to reveal some stuff. And later in this letter, just first it's Sir Henry. He says that there's some possible love intrigue was on the foot of him, oh, I'm sorry, Barrymore. First we're gonna do Barrymore. Maybe Barrymore is meeting a woman. This is Watson thinking this, right? Maybe there's some love intrigue. That's what he's doing at the window.
Like there's a woman out on the moor.
Yeah.
How are you?
And so he tells Sir Henry about this, and Sir Henry's like, yeah, he does walk around. I don't know what he's doing. And then Sir Henry says, I wonder what your friend Holmes would do if you were here. I believe he would do exactly what you now suggest. He would follow Barrymore and see what he did. So let's be like Sherlock. What would Sherlock do? Surely he would hear us, Watson worries. And then I love this detail that Doyle puts in here. I don't worry, he's deaf. We can follow him around the whole house. He doesn't know we're behind him. So, which you kind of need. Like, you can't follow him down this creaky old house without somebody hearing you. Like, he hears him in the hallway outside the bedroom. Why wouldn't Barrymore hear them following him? Apparently, he's a little deaf.
That has to be it. Did they take their shoes off too? I don't know.
Do they? I wonder if they do. They might. I don't know if it's in any pictures, but I'll have to look. So that's what their plan is going to be for tonight. And Sir Henry rubbed his hands with pleasure. He's like, woohoo, we're gonna have a little adventure. As Watson always is, with Holmes. And it's funny because when Holmes is like, oh, will you come? And Watson's like, yes. And he loves to go out in adventures.
Oh, yeah.
Here, it's Watson is the detective, and Sir Henry is being his Watson, going along with him on the adventure.
That's a very good point. That's an interesting observation.
Well, they Watson reveals to us that, or to Holmes, that Sir Henry is going to be restoring the house. He's got, big ideas for it and really going to bring it up to date. But now he needs a wife to, restore the house, to make it complete. And Sir Henry wants to go out when he's like, oh, I'm going to head out. And are you coming, Watson? And Watson's like, yeah, I have to come out. You can't be alone on the moor. But Sir Henry's like, dude, I'm going out to meet, Miss Stapleton. You can't come
I don't
out.
need a third wheel. I don't need a wingman.
So it puts Watson in an awkward position. I was at a loss what to say or what to do. So what do? I follow him without him knowing.
As you do.
Makes sense. Totally reasonable.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
The instructions from Holmes, he's got to do it, so he does. And he sees them, he sees the lovers, he sees Stapleton interrupt them angrily. And Watson is really upset by this because, he's spying upon a friend and he doesn't like that. But what can he do? But he does see the incident occur with Stapleton very angry and Sir Henry trying to explain. And even Beryl kind of, he says, Sir Henry, he stooped his head to hers and she raised one hand as if in protest, like he's just watching this, like, whoa, how do you interpret that? And then Stapleton comes running up.
Yes.
Well, Watson does admit it to Sir Henry that he saw them, that he, and Sir Henry, for an instant, his eyes blazed at me, but my frankness disarmed his anger and he broke at last into a rather rueful laugh. And this is perfectly Sir Henry, because we've had this description of him before where he's got this Sir Hugo anger in him, but he's also not, and then he can calm down after that initial thing. So that's more than once.
Yes.
Well, he says that Stapleton, then first he's wondering, like, is Stapleton crazy? Because, like, why would he be upset at the lord of the super rich, 1%er of Baskerville Hall wanting to marry his sister?
Right, indeed.
But then and he tells Watson there's a light in a woman's eyes that speaks louder than words. So, I offered marriage. And then Stapleton does come up and apologizes. He comes to offer apologies for the rudeness in the morning. He just says that it was just a shock, that, like, oh my God, my sister's going to go away from me. And so that's why I reacted. And he asks Sir Henry for 3 months. It's like, just let me get used to the idea. For 3 months, don't woo my sister.
Well, I will say, in Stapleton's defense, they just met. I mean, they literally just met, and Stapleton is so taken with her that he's already, not Stapleton, Sir Henry is already talking marriage. It's a bit quick, but maybe things out there on the
19th century. There's no dating. You meet somebody. I mean, this is changing clearly, and it changes by class as well. But definitely in Sir Henry's position, if he's interested in a woman and gives her attentions, there is going to be expectations there right off the bat. So he can court her, but he's got to be really careful about how he courts her if he's not interested in marrying her. So
right, but
courtship
they
usually
just met last chapter. It's like there's not been courtship. There's no there's been no opportunity for them to I mean, this is the first time he's really had a chance to be alone with her.
Yeah.
And he goes right there. And that's a little, I
Yeah,
think that's a bit fast, even for this time of.
We're at the end of the 19th century. Like, if we're going back to the earlier part of the 19th century, it definitely would have been like, you have to declare your intentions. Like, courtship means I'm intending to marry you.
Yes.
And so we're past that time, but it's still, you know, this is how people used to, well, it doesn't matter in real life, because in books, this is what happens.
This
Somebody
is what happened.
fall in love and you're going to marry them. And that's not unusual for a story. Well, Watson, you know, now that, you know, we find this out about them. And so Watson's like, well, there's one of our small mysteries cleared up. It is something to have touched bottom anywhere in this bog in which we are floundering. And then he says, and now I pass on to another thread, which I have extricated out of the tangled skein. So, or skein.
There's that phrase.
Yeah. From the original title of Study in Scarlet, Tangled Skein or Skein. Is it Skein or Skein? I say both.
I say both too, so I'm not quite sure.
Corrected, and now I'm never sure which it is. So, but I love this. There's one of our mysteries, like Dr. John Watson, consulting detective.
Yep.
Cross
that one off.
So, but now they've got to get back to the Barrymore mysteries, and he says, "Congratulate me, my dear Holmes. Tell me that I have not disappointed you as an agent, that you do not regret the confidence which you showed in me when you sent me down. All these things have, by one night's work, been thoroughly cleared. He is victorious. He solved the case, Sherlock, while you weren't here." Well,
you know, when I read this, I have a couple thoughts. I mean, Watson has been chastised for his lack of investigative prowess in the past by Holmes. And so this sounds like, now I got it right. You must admit, I got it right this time. And so I think we're seeing an echo of Watson's previous detection evaluations by Sherlock. And Watson's confident that this time he's got it right.
Frequently in stories, here's what happens. Holmes says, "What can you tell me about this?" And Watson says, "Oh, this, that, and the other thing." And Holmes is like, "Ha, Watson, great job." Watson's like, "Oh boy, I'm right." And then Holmes says, "Well, except you got everything wrong." And
you missed everything of importance, but
points out how he's gotten all these things wrong. So
right.
with the stick in the beginning, and Holmes had to correct it. So this is the way these things usually work.
I do like the letter writing technique. Of course, Dracula was, his friend Bram Stoker wrote Dracula a few years earlier than this story, and that was all letters and diary entries and everything.
Yeah,
and
we're getting that.
It's an effective technique, and I during this middle part of the story, I've often wondered if Doyle was sort of emulating or inspired by.
Well, it winds up being especially needed here, because what don't we have here? Who don't we have here? Is we don't have Sherlock.
We don't have Sherlock Holmes.
This is a Sherlock Holmes story that I've told everybody. I'm writing a Sherlock Holmes story, and guess what? Sherlock's going to stay in London, and Watson's going to go off investigate. And I can imagine, especially by this issue here, this is part 5 now, in January 1902, that the audience is thinking like, well, or I'm sorry, December 1901. I can imagine the audience is like, why is this a Dr. Watson adventure?
Right.
So,
Dr. Watson, crime doctor. Yes.
But these letters are keeping kind of Sherlock in the story, in a sense, reminding the readers that this is a Sherlock Holmes story. Here's Watson writing to him, telling him everything that's going on. But I can imagine that there may have been some readers who might be getting impatient. Maybe some of you first-time readers are. Maybe you're like, "Can Sherlock please come in the story?"
Where is he? Yeah.
So, well, now here's what Watson has solved, and it's the mystery of the Barrymore. So the next night, he and Sir Henry sit up late, lowered the lamp, and sat smoking cigarettes all night long. Barrymore obviously couldn't smell either as well as he walked past the room with all the smoke billowing out of it. Nobody's awake in there. Well, they follow him down the hall. He tiptoed down the passage, like you can imagine that, like tiptoeing down.
Oh yeah.
And he's in bare feet, as we've seen in the other picture.
Mhm.
They find him crouching at the window, candle in hand,
Yeah.
and his white, intent face pressed against the pane, exactly as I had seen him 2 nights before. And then they walk in. Barrymore springs from the window with a sharp hiss of his breath. He's trembling. What are you doing here, Barrymore? And he I'm holding the candle to the window. I love this. Not doing any harm. I'm holding a candle. What are you doing? I'm holding a candle to the window.
And what?
But why? Like, I would have been great if he said, I'm standing in a room. What are you? He wants him
Well,
to,
it's a classic ploy. When confronted with something, play dumb. What?
Watson says he must have been holding it as a signal, and then he holds it up, and then I gave a cry of exultation because of yellow light out on the on the moors he can see. So it was a signal. And then Barrymore's like, I'm not telling you anything. It's my business and not yours. I will not tell. Then you're fired. He gets fired on the spot and in disgrace. And then, but Sir Henry's like, you have been with our family for,
Yeah.
for over, your family has lived with mine for over 100 years. I can't believe this. And then Mrs. Barrymore comes in, paler and more horror-struck than her husband. Her bulky figure in a shawl and skirt. Doyle really wants us to know that she's big.
She wasn't that first pageant illustration. No, she's.
We've had it 3 times. This is her picture now that we can see. And here she is. This is clearly someone else now that Pageant is drawn, that now I've got the picture of her. She's in her, robe here at night. Barrymore, I can't tell the feet there, but they've got their shit. They haven't gone barefoot.
Yeah, they're not barefoot yet.
They're still in their evening clothes here after dinner, their evening dress. They never even got changed to do this. So I love I do like this illustration. I like the dark circles under his eyes that you assume are for the lighting.
Yes.
So, but also make him look a little gloomier and a little
creepy.
And her too, with just the light on the face.
But she is a much more stately figure than first portrayed earlier.
Yeah. And the light
and her arms are crossed. You can't see her hands. She's kind of enveloped in this.
Watson's obviously holding the candle here in front, and this is where all the lights come out of. I like
that's really nice.
It's really nice at doing the lighting of
really good
illustrations. All righty. She comes in now, and now she tells the whole truth. And then we find out Selden, the escaped convict, is her brother, and they have been helping him. They've been giving him food. And the light was to tell him that he could come and get the food. And then she gives the little backstory for Selden. He's her younger brother. They humored him too much and he was a lad, and he came to think that the world was made for his pleasure. And then he started murdering people. But like, she doesn't like defend him too much, but it's just like that you made a big leap from he was a nice child to now he's this horrible murderer.
But it reminds me of Copper Beaches. Oh, one delightful little romper. You'll love it when he's smacking the cockroaches. Smack, smack, smack. It's like, oh, he's a wonderful little kid. But
Yeah,
you
remember
would
his
have
name?
stuck.
You remember his name?
Yeah, I should.
Edward.
Edward. Yeah,
Edward. Edward
Edward.
Rewcastle. So,
Edward Rewcastle, the
well, Eddie killing the bugs.
but that's the thing, that was, that was a parent characterizing a really obviously a horrible child, as delightful and wonderful. And here we've got the big sister doing the same with somebody who obviously was probably killing small animals and doing Lord knows what as a child, grows up to be a murderer.
He is, but because he's the brother and he has to, she has to take care of him still, and she's not going to, not take care of him. So they give him the food, and when before Sir Henry came, it was easy, and now they have to, you get the food out to him somehow. So,
right.
Sir Henry pulls back on the fire. He's on them being fired. He's like, okay, I can't blame you now. You were, sticking up for your wife. We'll talk about it tomorrow. And then as soon as they're out, he's like, by thunder, Watson, I'm going out to take that man. Like he wants an adventure here. Get your revolver and put on your boots. Are you armed? I asked. Watson asked him. He says, I have a hunting crop.
Oh.
We know how dangerous hunting crops could
Well,
be.
yeah, indeed. Yes.
So Sherlock has used it a couple times, and
a loaded hunting crop.
yes. So we had at our last Copper Beaches meeting, we had one. Somebody brought one made. I can't remember who it was. Somebody maybe will tell me. Somebody maybe that was at no, I don't think anybody in the chat was at our Copper Beaches. But somebody brought a loaded hunting crop, and man, you would take. It wasn't Xander, because Xander gave a talk on it, but someone actually brought a loaded hunting crop.
Oh my goodness.
And it was like you'd take somebody's head off with that thing. So it was so he's gonna have a hunting crop. Watson's got his gun. I say, Watson, what would Holmes say to this? How about that hour of darkness in which the power of evil is exalted?
Yeah.
And
but see, that's the thing. That's a great line, because you don't want to be invoking something, right? You're a lot of ghost stories, a lot of Gothic literature, you casually invoke that, you mock it, and then boom, here it comes.
And it was, and it's also, it's Sir Henry suddenly putting on the brakes a little bit, like, whoa, wait a minute, what are we doing? Doing this, and then as soon as he says it, out of the vast gloom of the moor, that strange cry, which
comes
on the borders of the great Grimpenmire, it came with the wind through the silence of the night, a long, deep mutter, then a rising howl, and then the sad moan in which it died away again. Again and again it sounded, and the whole air throbbing with it, strident, wild, and menacing. The baronet caught my sleeve, and his face glimmered white through the darkness. Now he's wondering whether or not I should have come out here with it. Like,
was this a good idea?
He's like, it was the cry of the hound, and he's starting to believe it now. He asked,
and what I love about this, I remember when I first read this story, it's October in the story. I think it was probably October, maybe it was later than that, but October in the story, so it's autumnal. It's kind of that Halloween-y kind of time, and it's dark, and they're out there in the dark, and the moon is shining, and you've been casually, what about the powers of darkness, blah, blah, blah. And then here comes the cry of the
Watson
hound.
tells him too. They say it is the cry of the Hound of the Baskervilles.
Yeah, so good.
It says he grew silent for a few moments. So then he's, my God, can there be some truth in all these stories? Is it possible I am really in danger from so dark a cause? It's one thing to laugh about it in London, another to stand out here in the darkness of the moor and to hear such a cry as that. I don't think that I am a coward, Watson, but that sound seemed to freeze my very blood. So feel my hand. Even says feel my hand. And it's cold as a block of marble.
Yeah, it's so good.
Well, they've got to go on with it though, and see if they can catch Selden. And then they come up and they see the light. There's a candle burning, and a face comes out. There was thrust out an evil yellow face, a terrible animal face, all seamed and scored with vile passions, foul with mire, with a bristling beard, and hung with matted hair. It might have belonged to one of those old savages who dwelt in the burrows on the hillsides. This idea that when they see him, let's look at the illustration first. Because he Paget draws this. Oh, and it's the illustration that starts it. Yes, it actually is the illustration that begins the issue, because these issues have kind of frontis illustrations to them. And here he is out looking at him. Here they see him over, and here's the face here. I'll zoom that a little bit. This scary, monster-like, face looking out. I like how Watson's kind of the lead here, and Sir Henry's more behind him, cowering a little bit.
Sir Henry's lost a little bit of his enthusiasm for this expedition, I think.
But it's also that idea that Watson describing him like he could be one of these, he could be one of these savages from prehistoric times that used to live here. Again, this is that reminder of that we've had since the very beginning of this, of atavism, of this kind of, hereditary, uncivilized parts of us coming out again. And here is a physical representation of that, where it's not a metaphor. This is the past coming back to haunt us, embodied in this savage killer out on the moors.
It does, it shows up in a number of ways throughout, prior to the story and afterwards. He talks about Professor Moriarty as, there's a hereditary problem in his family tree that at some point
Colonel Sebastian Moran, the same.
Yes.
And and all through this story, every time it seems like, well, not every time, but frequently Sir Henry they talk about his ancestors and what is he inherited from them, and is Sir Hugo still, inside him, going to come out again?
Right. And later on, you even see it sort of represented in stories like The Creeping Man, where somebody's got this weird scenario going on where the guy's trying to regain his vitality for a younger woman. And instead he just sort of reverts to this sort of, primitive half man, half animal state. And like, it's always in you, all it needs, something can unlock it, and here it comes.
Doyle's really interested, especially in this story and this idea of the past coming back to haunt us, and it's perfect for a Gothic story, because that's what Gothic is, when the past comes back to threaten you. But we get this constant physical, real world reminders of it with the prehistoric remains, and now Selden is looking like one of these prehistoric peoples. So
Doyle had a real life interest in paleontology and archaeology.
The
whole Piltdown Man thing was going on around this time, and all of that was a thing. They were finding dinosaur fossils in his neighborhood practically, And so there's all of that was kind of in the air.
Mhm.
Drinking it in. I think it's all showing up here as well.
Well, Selden, it says the moon broke through the clouds and they see Selden running with great speed down the other side like a mountain goat. And Watson says we were both fair runners and in good condition, but they couldn't catch him. It's interesting. There's a difference in the text in the American McClure's when it is we were both swift runners and in fairly good condition. And this is we were both fair runners and in good condition. And as I've seen in several instances in the past, Steve, it seems that when there's differences in the American text, that was probably taken from a manuscript. And that when the Strand, you have the same manuscript, but they would have their house style and they would edit it some, but the American text wouldn't edit it, which seems to me what's that. But we don't know because we don't have that page of the Hound manuscript to check. That's just my working theory. That
it's a good one.
It can be
It's a good
proved
one.
in a few instances where that happens.
Mhm.
But I always think that was probably in the manuscript. Anyway, it's irrelevant. I'm sorry to bring it up, everybody. It's like a little manuscript detail that I always find those things
No,
interesting.
I love that stuff. It's good.
Well, it was at that moment that there occurred a most strange and unexpected thing. Watson says the moon was low upon the right, and the jagged pinnacle of a granite tor stood up against the lower curve of its silver disk. There, outlined as black as an ebony statue on that shining background, I saw the figure of a man upon the tor. And I love this. We get the reminder. This is a letter. Do not think that this was a delusion, Holmes. I assure you that I have never in my life seen anything more clearly. It was a tall, thin man. He stood with his legs a little separated, his arms folded, his head bowed, as if he were brooding over that enormous wilderness of peat and granite which lay behind him. He's the very spirit of that terrible place. And he knows it's not the convict because he knows he's far from where this guy is, where he ran. And he's taller. And then when he tries to show Sir Henry, the man was gone. Let me share the picture of that from the Strand. There's the other one. Here it is at the end of this issue. There it is. That's a great picture.
Yeah, that's so good. That's good.
I saw the figure of a man on the tour, this beautiful, the way he's done the moon here. And here, see, the landscape's good here in the last picture. I think I spoke too soon about
He's getting better as he
the
goes along.
landscape because this issue he really seems to do. So, who is this going to be? Well, we'll have to wait for a future issue for that. Feel free to make your guesses. But Watson, right away, he had not seen this lonely man upon the tour. Oh, Sir Henry hadn't seen him, so he couldn't feel the thrill, which his strange presence and his commanding attitude had given to me. So he thinks it could have been a warder, but you know, there's also the danger here that somebody was following Sir Henry in London. Could this be, you know, the person still following him out here? Well, they're going to let the Princetown prison people know that, you know, where to find Selden. And then Watson concludes with, you must acknowledge, my dear Holmes, that I have done you very well in the matter of a report. And I still feel that it is best that I should let you have all the facts and leave you to select for yourself those which will be of most service to you in helping you to your conclusions. But it's not,
I have to kind of agree with them. I mean, he's done a pretty good job of saying what happened. I mean, I think Watson's done a good job of reporting, and he hasn't tried to really interpret it much. And
but he has done some. He's been trying to figure it out, and I get that.
No, he's working on it. You know, yeah, he is. I mean,
but what he
whole Barrymore thing, they got that worked out.
What he knows is the last sentence is, best of all would it be if you could come down to us. That's what we really want. Well, and here's
That's
another difference in the American text. The American text actually had another line after that, and it says, "In any case, you will hear from me again in the course of the next few days." So, and I would suggest that probably in the manuscript that line was there. And
I would bet too. And then it was,
cut
but it
from
was,
British
was
Strand,
left off.
but it
Yes.
made it in the American because they were just going by whatever the manuscript said. So,
Mhm.
but
makes
best of
sense.
all, if you could come down to us, that's better. And like, please.
It does give you the impression that Watson is beginning to sense that he's probably at the limit of his investigative ability here.
Well, he solved the mystery of the Barrymores walking around the house in night. So
He did do that. That's true. He did. But now there's a hound on the moor, and there's a criminal, a murderer on the moor, and there's a weirdo on the rock at night standing up there. Okay, Holmes, you need to, okay, time for you to come down. I've done what I can.
Well, we got through these 3 in 2 hours. That was pretty good. I thought we were going to go real long, but we
That
didn't.
was good. It's great, actually.
So, and the stories, just to wrap it, it's unusual that he is, that Doyle is writing this long Sherlock story, and now we've had, 5 chapters without Sherlock Holmes. So, it's 3 serial parts with no
Right.
Sherlock Holmes, leaving Watson to carry on the investigation is an unusual way for him to come back, to bring Sherlock Holmes back in a long tale. So
Max McGee in the chat says, "This isn't a Sherlock Holmes story. This is a Watson story."
far it ends. It's Dr. John Watson,
Good point.
consulting detective. So that's him. All right, Steve.
Time for Holmes to come back.
Steve, thank you so much for doing the show with me. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It was a real joy. I'm sorry for the technical snafu there for a few minutes,
We
but
worked through it. We're fine.
got through it. Yeah, it was
No
good.
worries. Thank
Thank
you,
you, Monica, for jumping in for a few minutes.
Thank you, Monica, for jumping in and being the special surprise guest co-host. So that was great to have you do that. Thank you so much. Thanks to our chat, Mrs. Hudson Brianna, for managing the links in the chat. Sherlockians, thank you for joining us for this, the 4th episode of Sherlock Mondays, the Hound of the Baskervilles. A reminder, by registering for this program, you have helped the Rosenbach create more programs like our free Biblioventure series, and you've also helped us care for our collections, including several Doyle first editions, the manuscript for The Empty House among them. If you'd like to make a further donation, or if you're not a member and you'd like to become a member, you can do so at our website, rosenbach.org. Your generosity is always greatly appreciated. I will see you next week for episode 5 of The Hound, which will cover chapters 10 and 11. And Curtis Armstrong is coming back. That'll be a lot of fun to have Kurt. Curtis is great, isn't he, Steve?
Oh, yes, indeed.
What a great
Absolutely.
Sherlockian he is. Well, bye, everyone. Steve, thanks again.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, everybody in the chat. It was great. A lot of fun.
All right, everyone. I am Edward G. Pettit of the Rosenbach Museum and Library, where the game is a book. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.